Hi, I'm Peter Gordon, and this is a production of Saturday Works. Happy Easter! This is one of our weekly gospel reflections on how we can encounter God in serving our neighbors. So for this reflection for Easter Sunday, you might ask, well, what does serving our neighbor have to do with the resurrection? And what I want us to think about is actually the entire sequence of events from the Last Supper through the resurrection, beginning with what's referred to in the Gospel of John as Jesus' prayer. Now, in his prayer, one of the things he said, and one of the things he asked his Father for, is that he wanted us to be one with him as Jesus is one with the Father. Now jump ahead, after the Last Supper, where did they go? They went to the Garden of Gethsemane. And you might wonder, well, what's happened there? Why was Jesus in such agony? And I have a thought about that to share. So St. John Paul II had this prayer that he was said to say every time he met somebody, which was, Lord, let me see them as you see them. And I think the prayer of Jesus, given what he had prayed at the Last Supper, was to ask the Father to show us to him. What I think he saw was the suffering that we were in because of our sin. And I think what the Father was asking Jesus to do in the Garden of Gethsemane was, in his human nature, to accept entering into that suffering and bearing it for us. Now, if we look at Jesus' agony in the garden as the point where he is shown all of our suffering, then all of the other events after that are Jesus entering into that suffering and healing it. Now, in Jesus' resurrection, and then ultimately his ascension into heaven, which we'll celebrate in a few weeks, that's the completion of this entrance into our suffering and his healing of us. So what does Jesus' passion help us understand about the significance of serving our neighbor? Now, every time we go out and serve a neighbor in need, we are, in a way, performing our own little passion. We need to understand what is their suffering, and a great way to do that is using St. John Paul II's prayer. Lord, let me see my neighbor as you see them. And when we see them in their suffering, we can enter into that suffering, just like Jesus did when he picked up his cross and went to Calvary. And when our work is completed, both we and our neighbors are healed and transformed. Now, similarly, we can learn a lot about Jesus' passion and understand the depths of God's mercy from the perspective that we learn from serving our neighbors. Next time you're out engaging in whatever service activity you have, think about what Jesus did from the Last Supper through the resurrection. He prayed that we may be one. Maybe that's a prayer we can bring to our service, that we and our neighbor will be one. Ask to see their suffering as God sees it and choose to enter into it. And then, when you're all done, think about how both you and your neighbor are transformed. Well, and on that note, I want to wish you again a happy Easter. Thank you for joining with me today, and may God bless you. I'll see you next week.